begin to change, as national issues begin to press in our local communities, I can think of nothing more worthwhile than to invest our time and our energy and our learning into hearing from educational leaders and community leaders in this moment, how they're responding to, how they are adapting, how they are moving through this critical moment in time and meeting the moment. And let me be clear, meeting the moment for those students within their communities and within their schools and how they're working together. That's what brings us here today. We're talking about youth voice. We're talking about civic engagement. We're talking about making sure that our schools and our communities continue to operate and be effective and succeed no matter what is taking place around us. And so, with that, I am super, super happy to have two leaders from Minnesota with us here. Next slide, Charnice, that we like to introduce into the room and have them introduce themselves. There we go. Tony Simmons and Jose Perez. Jose is with a Good Trouble Foundation, and Tony Simmons is the executive director of High School for the Recording Arts. And by way of coming into the room, let me turn it over to you both, but first to Jose to introduce yourself, about your organization, what brings you to this space.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for making some time. Time is the greatest gift we could give. My name is Jose Perez. I am a St. Paul East Sider, an R&B artist, and a graduate of High School for Recording Arts. I now get to serve as the chief troublemaker and executive director to Good Trouble, a Minnesota-based movement and nonprofit focused on carrying the legacy and lessons of John Lewis, Ella Baker, so many others, and really advancing youth nonviolent organizing and demonstrating what it means to be the North Star state in this union. And so I'm here because Tony is a key troublemaker, and High School for Recording Arts has been blazing the trails for troublemakers like myself. I've been a lifelong troublemaker. That's how I came here. Uh, Son of immigrants, dyslexic. I failed first grade. I failed ninth grade before I came to High School for Recording Arts. To save us time, I didn't do too well in between. But I came here and I was able to turn my artistry into activism. I was able to build on my strengths rather than try to prepare for a world full of deficits. And I just, once that cat got out the bag, I started understanding my part and my voice and more than just artistry and the interconnectedness of it all. And so I've been able to dedicate my journey and my passions to carrying forward this movement of Good Trouble. And I'm really excited to be able to continue these experiences with, yes, young people from my alma mater and, of course, across Minnesota, because High School for Recording Arts in Minnesota, we need to demonstrate what's possible here. Even with constraints comes creativity, and we have an abundance of creativity here at High School for Recording Arts. And I'm just super grateful to be able to give y'all a glimpse of what we've been juggling, some of the experiences we've had, and just super, super grateful to be able to have conversations from across the country in such a needed time. Tony?
Wow. May I just bask in a moment and say how proud I am of this young man? And thank you, Jose, for, recognizing our family here at High School for Recording Arts and all the work that you're doing. And I just want to greet my RAPSA family. I'm a RAPSA board member. I'm also helped to create the High School for Recording Arts here in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm the executive director. My life has been committed for now maybe 27 years towards re-engaging opportunity youth, really seeing their promise that so many times school systems just look past, such as with Jose. So for me, it's really been about realizing the vision of our founder, David T.C. Ellis, who had a recording studio. He grew up in this neighborhood just a few blocks from here where the school is at, and happened to be friends with the recording artist Prince as Prince was rising up, and convinced him to be his rapper in his organization and signed to his label. Over time, David was so inspired, he'd open up his own recording studio, and And that studio was simply to be in the music business. And that's when I met David, because I was practicing law on the East Coast and doing entertainment law. And we met at a conference. So I helped David with his music career, but then for him to open up his recording studio. And over time, young people were showing up like Jose, who were really amazingly creative, brilliant. We call them sometimes hip hop geniuses, but they weren't in school. And we couldn't understand why they weren't in school because of what we were seeing and hearing and feeling from them. But then we realized that the school really wasn't designed to recognize those attributes that we saw. So David had the brilliant idea to flip the studio into a school, and we applied to be a public charter school in 1997, became that in 1998, and since then we've just been doing this work. So I'm just really, a proud part of this family here. Um, I really believe strongly in education innovation. I've worked at the High Tech High Graduate School of Education and have done work around the world in terms of recognizing young people for the brilliance that they come with and for us to really recognize that. Last thing I just want to say is I'm also a proud member of this community here in St. Paul, Minneapolis, the Twin Cities. It's a creative community. It's vibrant. It's strong, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. Thank you, gentlemen. So let's just jump into it. Sharnice, you can take down that slide if that's okay. Gentlemen, I'd like to jump into it, but I'd like to do just a little bit of stage setting and housekeeping for our guests. We will have time for a question and answer session. We'll leave about 10 or 15 minutes before we close out. There is a Q&A function, and so please feel free to add your questions or your comments to the Q&A function. This conversation is very organic, and so we may get to some of those Q&As before we get to the end. We'll just be adaptable and flexible. So that's the housekeeping piece. I like to really set the stage, and there are many folks who might be joining us that have heard this before if they know RAPSA. I like to begin with the end in mind, and for us, it's the students. And I like to ask this question. Imagine what a student could achieve if they knew they were fully supported by a school system and a community fully committed to their success. And I want to take a second and I want to go, imagine what a student could achieve if they knew they were fully supported by a school system and a community fully committed to their success. That's powerful. Their potential is uncapped. And those are the at promise and opportunity youth students that we are talking about today. And we're talking about them in the context of both their school system and their community so that they can contribute to the positive vital conditions of their community. With that, we've all have seen some of the pressures that have been leaning in on Minnesota. To be honest, there have been several critical moments that Minnesota's had to contend with. The COVID-19 pandemic, George Floyd, and now certain federal issues of occupation in that city. So we all have had the opportunity to bear witness to that. But I've had the opportunity. I'm here in California on the West Coast. You guys are more toward the East Coast, and I know we have some folks joining us all the way from New York. But for those that aren't there on ground level, could you gentlemen help paint a picture in our mind's eye of what you have been dealing with and encountering over the last few months as it sets the stage and landscape for part of this conversation?
Well, you know, it's oddly familiar in an unfortunate way. I think right now we're having to deal with things in a chaotic nature and really in a fight or flight mode right now. That's what I think all community is at, community organizers, schools. And so what I've seen through and through is that people having to be in real time on their feet and having to get creative about what does it look like for each and every single one of us to play our part, and how do we ensure that each and every single one of us knows that while the media is gone and while the people start transitioning out of Minnesota, that we do the work to rebuild. So I think I'm seeing a lot of people that are thinking about the long-term vision while also dealing with like real-time crisis of how do our young people continue to deal with this learning loss, with the culture of, just the chaos. And when we talk about the importance of schools, sometimes the disconnection of what's really happening in the world and what we're talking about and what we're keeping our young people busy with, and the lack of leaning into their gifts into such real world times. So what you're seeing now, what day to day with me and Tony, is how do we lean into young people as active drivers and designers and implementers of these real time needs, and really making sure that our young people see us for what it is. We don't have the answers, but we get the answers when we're in the pursuit, when we're working hand in glove, and when we try to not act like we have it all in a magic box somewhere. But when young people understand that they're a key part of this process, key part of this democracy. So you're seeing a lot of resilience, you're seeing a lot of hurt, but you're also, what I'm seeing on the ground is young people just moving, young people just looking for their place in this world and being put in backs against the wall and having to organize and having to at least um, confront with what does this moment mean for them, and how does that influence how they're now living their life. How would you respond as a school leader?
Well, well, first, I just want to say, I think we all realize here that in order for us to really be supportive of each other, we have to first make sure we're okay and recognize that, it's like being on a plane when they say the oxygen comes down. You put the mask on first before you tend to your child. um, because the pressure has been real, and the impact and how it has manifested in the way we move, the way we, connect, um, is something that is really, really important to process so that we could be in the best place to be able to support others. So when it comes to how do I see it as a school leader, I want to make sure when I come here, um, I'm not expecting to come perfect, but I am expecting to come, aware of what I'm going through, so I can empathize best with my staff and my students, their families, and the community. I think that processing and those steps are really, really key. It has been intense, you know, when the first killing of Renee Good happened. um, it was so close to all of us here. The Twin Cities is not that large, and what actually occurred happened just blocks from my daughter's school. Um, People here live in those communities within blocks, students and staff, and processing that both with myself and my family, and then coming here to the school. It was just really something that has been a testament of will, a testament of purpose, of collective dialogue, active listening and understanding, and then eventually activation. What are we going to do? And I'm just so proud of my team here. I'm so proud of our young people who've been able to come into this space as best they can, and feel vulnerable, but knowing that they're in a safe space to express how they feel. And for those who have been too fearful to come into school, knowing that we got them, that we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that they stay connected. And at this time, I want to thank RAPSA for all of his support in supporting that effort for our young people to stay connected to their learning. Thank you so much for that. So for me, particularly as a leader, it's doing all the things that must be done to enable young people to be in a mental, emotional, spiritual um, space to want to be able to learn. I mean, that's it. And when you turn away from any of those parts that um, you know is that are the active ingredients to learning, you're going to get dysfunction. You're going to get despair. So for us, we refuse to turn away. That doesn't mean we have all the answers. That doesn't mean we have all the resources to do it to the extent that it needs to be done. But we're not going to turn away from it, and we're going to do our best. And that's where I would end that. We're doing the best that we can to support our community.
I appreciate that, gentlemen. And I know Tony, when some of the events were taking place early on, we had a conversation, and one of the things we talked about was that it shouldn't take an act of courage to go to school, right? Our community shouldn't be sort of on the front lines of trauma. And so the other thing that we talked about was along the lines of what you just said, was that we know it's people, not programs, that make the difference, right? It's folks like yourself and Jose coming together. And some of the most important, but what it has me reflect on is some of the most important lessons that school district leaders and community leaders like yourselves took from COVID and other critical pivotal moments is just that it's people and not programs that make the biggest difference for educational achievement and community social emotional health, right? And what I mean by that is the folks in your community, the young folks, the teachers, uh, keeping a positive mental attitude and continuing to support the positive vital condition of their community. With that said, could you gentlemen tell us how your leadership and your team is guiding your organization in order to meet this moment and to support your communities? Are there, understanding that is the people that's the engine behind it, but are there any particular programs that you put into to place to support your students? And Tony, I know you went to distance learning for a while.
Yeah, we definitely we were afforded that option because the state saw it as an emergency. So we were able to have our young people who are fearful of leaving their homes to come to school to have that connection. So that distant learning was a very important piece. And we had experience doing that through COVID. So we reminded ourselves that we brushed off some of the processes that we use. For example, we're a creative school. And during COVID, we're right now at the High School for Recording Arts in Studio A of our recording studio. Kai, you've been here before. I think you blessed the mic. uh, but during COVID, it was like, well, how do we transfer this experience virtually? And we created kits that we were able to deliver to students and their families so that they can have the access to the same software and interface to create and do the things that we do here in this studio. So doing things like that where we're able to replicate as best we can the experience of what it means to be a part of High School for Recording Arts. And that also means not only innovative learning, but essential support, making sure our students are fed, making sure they have the mental health support, making sure that they're able to get the information they need so that they could confront some of the systemic obstacles that are keeping them away from their true purpose. And obviously doing that in person is best, but in a virtual context, again, doing the best we can, making sure that they still have access to that. So doing home visits, making sure that whatever they may need, if there's a way for us to get it to them, even if they're not here, that we do that. So my staff, again, we're experienced at that. Um, we have amazing community partners to help us support that work. And I just want to transition to Jose. And Jose is, absolutely one of those partners that has enabled us to do it. In fact, just today, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, Jose's not here just so that we could both be on the Zoom. Good Trouble is literally working with our young people this morning, and they're continuing through the afternoon on issues that are key and important to them as it relates to um, the, the consequences of all of these things we're talking about, particularly as it relates to chronic absenteeism. So, our community partners, Jose, Good Trouble, and others have just been an amazing contribution to everything that I've mentioned.
And what I'd add is, a big part of what we see as our mission of advancing nonviolent organizing is thinking about how do we embody that democratic process in a space like schools where it's ideal to be able to be a playground of those experiences. And so that's exactly what Tony has just mentioned. We're now in a three-phase process where we've modernized the 6 steps in this of nonviolent organizing that MOK, John Lewis, and Ella Baker, and many others put together. And now we're thinking about how do we embed young people's voices and their creative thinking into the fabric of embedding and implementing and reflecting on school operations, on school policies, on how the school experience happens. And in response to the craziness in the world, because this, school by school work is incredibly important. And one thing that we wanted to do as an organization to make sure we're creating a space across the Twin Cities, because one thing is true is like the Twin Cities is so small, and the HSRA has a lot of Twin Cities like youngins here. And so we had hosted a nonviolent organizing training, and we have now committed to hosting one monthly to really be able to bring young people and young leaders across the cities, across these schools that we're working and engaging with, because that work is so important and is so needed. And young people need an opportunity to sharpen other iron. Iron sharpens iron, and young people need to be able to see others in action in the pursuit of happiness in the arena. And so, in response, Good Trouble will continue to, do the work that we have been doing of embedding youth voice into school improvement, as well as now thinking about how do we galvanize and build this youth wing to this current civil rights movement of our time.
You hit the nail on the head, Jose, and that is actually a great segue into a little bit more about your belonging, purpose, and power. So that's that question is coming your way. But before I do that question, I think it's important to note for our audience that as we talk about youth voice, civic engagement, civic learning, this is nonpartisan. This is not about being on one side or the other. This is strictly about making sure that our youth and those that serve them understand the importance of civics and civic learning, particularly in this moment. I've talked to a number of folks about RAPSA's journey into ensuring that youth voice is elevated and put to the forefront. RAPSA's been around for a little bit more than a baker's dozens of years, and we've always sort of supported students, but only through supporting the adults, right? The teachers and the educators. And in 2026, RAPSA's leaning more into direct support for youth and particularly lifting up youth voice. This is an important year. We're not focusing on the 250th or that it's a voting year, but it's important that we do focus on civic learning, particularly as sort of these national issues lean into our local communities. With that said, though, Jose, I love your website. There's a lot to be learned from there. But one of the things that is very clear as you work with youth is 3 pillars: belonging, power, and purpose. And I greatly appreciate your mission around democracy. Could you expand on those 3 pathways that allow young people to shape decisions, influence systems, and lead change both in the community and school systems? Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. And I just had to would also had to name kind of like the origins and knowing the space and place that I'm in right now. I've learned there's a lot of language out in the world. I was around language and our 4 values at High School for Culinary Arts of family, respect, education, community. And that those are foundational. And as I've continued to understand how power shifts, how youth develop, how humans kind of work a little bit. I've come to an understanding that there's 3 universal needs that all people, especially young people, long for, and it's a sense of belonging, it's a sense of power over their life, and a sense of a purpose, something greater than themselves. And so, one thing that's real is that often school culture is outcompeted by gang culture. And it's because things like gang culture will understand the fact that young people, people in general, crave for belonging, power, purpose. And they will help you understand that you will get a synthetic version of that with them. And that feeling is better than the absence of it. And so understanding that young people are longing for it, designed for it, we double down on that. And we figure out how do we start having conversations with adult troublemakers, young troublemakers, to start creating a foundation that we could start building off together and understanding how are our young people wired, how are we working, and so that's really key to when we think about how do we build this broad big movement that is going to be needed to. And you mentioned the 250th. I think it's fitting. I think it's something worth mentioning. It's something worth celebrating, y'all, because it's truly a gift that America gave the world of this idea of citizen and just the idea that each of us are endowed with unalienable rights. And and the pursuit of happiness actually is, yes, individual, but it's interconnected. And so we see schools as an engine of democracy. We see young people as a non-negotiable to democracy. And we want to better understand how to lean into that, knowing that that's the reality that's the arena we're in. And so belonging, power, and purpose have been, the non-negotiables when it comes to, all right, what's the situation? What are we talking about? And how are we going to approach it?
Right. That's right. And I love that. And thank you for lifting up democracy and 250th. And Tony, I think I spent some time traveling around the world with the House Democracy Partnership and helping some of our partner countries. But when you and I talked, we talked about something a little bit more precious, a little bit more intimate, and dare I say, very, very powerful. We talked about the importance of our youth bearing witness to this moment. And in particular, given your geographic sort of location to what's been taking place in Minnesota, you referenced your daughter and why you thought this was important for her and young people to bear witness. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, and first, let me segue from where Jose was to the whole aspect of the transformational outcome of becoming a change maker and really seeing Jose embody that. We want change agents in our community that come out of the work that we do when we're given this, very special privilege to educate our young people with public dollars. You know, their understanding of the world and understanding of our founding principles and really actively working to realize them fully is to me the highest order of the work that we do. Yes, so as these events were occurring, and I just want to mention one other. Yes, we came through COVID, came through George Floyd. We also had the horrific shooting at Annunciation School, which was also in South Minneapolis, where a number of young people and teachers were murdered. Um, then when Renee Good happened, I just want to say all of those were within walking distance blocks. George Floyd, Annunciation, and the killing of Renee Good, walking distance blocks from my daughter's school. The morning that it happened, Renee's Good's killing, I decided, as any parent would, particularly if your daughter goes home, an alternative way to pick her up myself, knowing what was happening. And when she got in the car, she was very, very, distraught because she was looking at her phone. And I thought it was around what happened with Renee Good, but it was actually because federal agents had seized upon the neighboring high school to hers that she had a lot of friends at, with all these pictures of agents just in these really, really aggressive stances right at the entrance of the school. Um, so in a moment, just trying to process with her, yeah, I thought about the fact that um, I felt I needed to say something, and my first thought was I wanted her to know all the feelings that she had were valid. That she's what she's experiencing. I want her to fully embrace them as human. And then I wanted her to know that, uh, her process and her care for her friends and any human being that she see is subjected to violence or anything aggressive is also valid. But last, I wanted her to also begin to recognize as a young woman, she's 16 years old. She's in school. Uh, she's seeing all of these things happening so close to her, time after time and after time again, as something that she doesn't have to have all the answers for now. Her 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 primary role, if she chooses to have one, is to simply bear witness to what's occurring. And I put it in the context of, because she's a history buff and she loves studying the hippie anti-war movement. And I mentioned to her, and thinking about John Lewis, that a lot of those young people in the anti-war movement in the late 60s, they were able to bear witness to the civil rights movements in the late 50s and early 60s. They were young people like she was. They weren't able to fully activate themselves. They may not have been living in the South where John Lewis was actively involved in what was going on, but they've seen it on television, and television really drove those images, from the civil rights movement that activated the country. And then when they came up and they began to connect the dots to the learning and what they had seen and what was happening, it led to activism. Um, that's why I love what Jose is doing right now. It really is helping to sharpen that connection in a way that I believe is holistic and healthy, but but at the same time gives a young person a sense of, like he's saying, belonging, purpose, and power. And that's, for me, and thank you for asking about my daughter, that, you know, if I could get those, have her have possessed those things, those qualities, I would feel very, very good.
And I just want to even just appreciate that gift that you just given of like just like that bear witness, because even I'm just reflecting like, because the greatest gift we can give to the world in my mind is to be our most true authentic self.
Mhm.
And in my vision is America, the United States, is the greatest form of government to honor that.
Mhm.
And that requires active citizenship.
Yes.
That requires us to not turn our head. That
Yeah.
requires us not to disengage,
Right.
not even in the littlest forms, because those moments shape you.
Yes.
Those moments shape us. If it shapes you, Tony, it shapes me. If it shapes you, Kai, it shapes us. And it like it this whole thing, this whole experiment of democracy, it's interconnected. And so I just appreciate that reminder, because sometimes you do need the reminders,
Mhm.
because you get so fatigued and you're on your phone that's consistently pumping all these images that really, even in this, John Lewis talked about, they didn't have no cell phones. It was so for better and for worse. There are some things that we're seeing in lightning speed and high volume, that that is hard. And being able to understand that, we need to be active citizens, and that is the way that we can uplift each other. And I just appreciated you naming like that nugget to your daughter. I'm gonna take that nugget with me, and that's powerful.
Man, I love it. I love it. Let me ask you this question. This is a little bit impromptu. Um, we often think about sort of youth leaders, or are those that are in charge of, the president of the student government, the president of the honor society. Is civic engagement and civic learning different for at promise youth and for opportunity youth? I mean, should folks be engaging with them with a different lens, or how can we make sure that our OI and AP are engaging in, civic partnership, civic engagement?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. One thing that I just love about our school is that it's like the capital is right there. It's
Hmm.
our backyard.
Hmm.
And so I named that to name like one of my very first times at the Capitol, as an at promise young person was, for, to protect my teacher's licensure, Miss Hobbin, who was my math teacher at high school for recording arts. And so it's just and that was my very first time myself seeing, students, teachers organize around an issue that's very personal. And if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And so I just see in real time that uh, that's the people's house.
Hmm.
And the people hold more power than the people in power.
Hmm.
And for us to hold that true, we need to bring the people to the people's house. And young people are people. And so so often I hear, the assumption is the democratic process is your vote. And John Lewis, I hear John Lewis right now, it's your most powerful nonviolent tool. So to use that, and democracy, it is an everyday act. And so I'm a believer that it hasn't been introduced to young people that are facing, the things that I faced as a first generation, as someone from the east side, a poor neighborhood in St. Paul. Um, and those are exactly the exposure points that help young people like myself understand our interconnectedness and understand that, oh, I have a pursuit of happiness too. And actually my voice actually weighs just as much as your voice right now in this Senate hearing. And so I appreciate the point of like, how do we activate our young people in this moment of civic need? Because absolutely we need at promise, at whatever. We need every young person to contribute their gift now more than ever, because we're in desperate need of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think the
Absolutely.
activism part is so key, particularly as it relates to opportunity youth, because um, you know, most times you don't become an opportunity youth because you have power or your community has had power, and there's us- usually systemic forces around that disempowerment, and just understanding that and recognizing that young people want to feel that they belong as a part of this democracy, and that their voices matter, and that they deserve to have the right towards happiness is an opportunity for us to really elevate civic engagement. It's not from a partisan perspective. It's simply from a perspective of what our rights are, our inalienable rights, our human rights, our rights within the Constitution. And I think schools like Youth Build does an amazing job in recognizing that and making that a part of their project-based learning platform. You know, there are many institutions that are really tasked with helping young people who have been given a unfair opportunity to understand why that has happened, how they can move from that state to a different level of power and engagement and activism that leads towards simply just being fully a citizen. So that's, for me, that's what the work is that we're doing, and so many others are doing that serve opportunity youth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful. You're both agents of change, servants, and like what you're getting at, Tony, oftentimes in certain communities, for example, I grew up in South Central LA in the 70s, and there was what seemed to be an infinite number of chances to get off track, and not so many opportunities to get on track. I think civic voice, youth voice, engagement, and empowerment are opportunities to get on track for those that may have gone left or right of track. And so you guys are providing a great service and opportunity to help make young folks' lives remarkably better. And that's what it's all about. I do want to get on to one thing that you said, Tony, about putting on your mask first. Oftentimes, we do a great chance of setting the space and supporting our youth, but then sometimes maybe not as good supporting those that are supporting the youth. I'd love to hear from you both about how you're supporting your teachers or your other colleagues in the nonprofit and community sector to make sure that they have what they need in their oxygen mask, so to speak.
For me, it begins with absolutely co-designing this work we do together. Um, that, you know, I have a role, but it's really a role among equals in terms of what we're investing into this space. Um, the work we do is so person to person, and it has to be authentic. That if it's a top down model, if it's just dictatorial, our students are going to feel that and they're going to reject it. Our staff is going to feel burnt out, not heard, not valued, and we're going to be in a constant state of flux. So, we know the work is hard, but we know we're here for each other. And and what does that mean? It's a it's a day-to-day proposition what it means. It might mean one day, we, we put aside the schedule and we just have a whole group conversation. Or maybe I bring in some, back massage masseuses to come in and support the staff, what we've done in the past.
I missed that staff meeting, by the way. I need to.
but but truly it's being in tune with each other. And you only could do that if you're in community with each other.
That's powerful. What I'd add to that is a concrete. I see young people as one of the most underutilized resources that we have when it comes to community building, school improvement, and so I think that is an understanding the how to that. How do we implement that? How do we embed youth voice into this process? How do we honor youth voice as not just something that is a box to check, but actually a real engine to this work? I think that's a key part of our work of modernizing the strategies of nonviolent organizing, understanding youth development and the promising strategies of places like high school for recording arts, and really being able to find that healthy middle of young people's unique gift, the world's greatest need, and just doubling down in that middle. So I think it's just making sure that we have a shared mindset on like, hey, these young people and us, we're on the same team. So we need to get on the same page so we can get to the same goal.
Right. Oh, that's powerful, and that leads us as we're talking about goals and looking over the horizon. Leads me to one more question before we get into some Q&A, which is the new normal. I mean, no one could fathom the tsunami of grief and fear and courage and collective strength that it would take to for Minnesota to endure what it has. And at the same time, we often want things to pass quickly so we can get back. I can't wait till this is over so I can just get right back to where we were. But my hope is that we collectively acquire the lessons learned from these moments as we move forward to create a new normal. I don't think there's any going back to what it was. It's really peering around corners and figuring out what the new normal is. Safety protocols within our schools and districts, flexibility, adaptability, things of that nature, right? So I'd love to hear from you before we get into Q&A. What are the most important lessons you think youth and students and our partners should learn from having to adapt to these current environments in Minnesota? And quite frankly, there's no fence around Minnesota. So these are lessons that folks anywhere from coast to coast can take with them.
Well, one thing that just surfaces on my mind is that we've been reaffirmed in our three core beliefs that have driven all of our decisions and everything that we do is one, young people are key to the solution. They are not a part of the problem. That two, everybody has a unique gift to contribute to the world and we the public need that. And three, we need to put aces in places, meaning we need to position those gifts for maximum potential. And so that's really what's ringing true for me is um, when I think about even when we didn't have the clarity, even when we could never imagine, I've been a young organizer for like 5, 6 years now. I've now led Good Trouble for it's about 2 years. We could have not predicted um, to commit our lives, our gifts to a movement of nonviolent organizing in Minnesota, one of the most purple states in the country, and the most divided in the most divided times in our country, in one of the most bluest cities in the country as well. So there's just like so many dynamics, but you have to lean into the fact that you do have a gift that you learn by doing. That it's a pursuit. It's not about the destination, and that's where the answers come from. That's what democracy is all about. It's about that messy process. And so I'm just reaffirmed that, you do not have to have the answers. And whole time you actually will receive a lot of support from the young people from your team if you're willing to name that and you're willing to lean into others as a resource to getting to that answer. So I'm just reaffirmed by the fact that we have this interconnected, responsibility and right of this pursuit of happiness, and it actually endangers each other and ourselves when we're not actively pursuing it. So it's just reminding each other, ourselves, we need to pursue our happiness. We need to not let the distraction fog up our vision for what our life needs to be and how we can elevate ourselves, our family, and our interconnected neighborhoods. So that's what I'm just affirmed with.
Yeah. For me, in the midst of uncertainty and disruption, adaptability is absolutely key. Being a creative school, we practice that literally, not just in this studio, but in every foot of this building, where our aim is to have young people like Jose, when he was a student, to practice the art of being free. I believe, when I go into a school and I'm trying to assess, who they are, I don't look at what programs or structures they got going. What structures or programs are they taking away that allow young people to breathe, that allow young people to pursue their passions and their interests, to be in a safe space to make mistakes, to try again and iterate and bump into each other, learn how to collaborate, solve problems, work through issues with each other. Have my staff bouncing and collaborating with themselves. Sometimes you see a group of students and a couple of staff that you don't even understand, what brings them together in terms of core content, breaking down those, silos of learning. And if you do that, but you still have the structure within your mind of where you're moving towards those transformational outcomes, um, you're going to have young people come out like Jose. And Jose is not an outlier. Jose for us is really what our young people embody in their lives. They may not have started an amazing, national nonprofit like Good Trouble, but they've done other amazing things. And I believe it is, from that, I love bell hooks, that whole aspect of, the art of practicing to be free. Um, AI, you know, all the things. I could just go down the line. If we're not doing that for our young people, if we're not giving them the space to do that right now, what are we setting them up for?
That's right.
And that's what I think about.
That's right. Oh, that's powerful. That's powerful. Hey, I definitely want to make sure. I know we can go on and on. We can jam in and out like a verbal jam session. I do want to get to some Q&A, and so for those in the audience, please populate the Q&A with your questions, with your comments. I know we have one in there right now from Christy, and I'll read that out. How can grassroots policy, that's small p, local policy, support engaging youth and creating community connections between schools and solutions? And that's for you, gentlemen.
I love that. That's the right question. And the school board is like the ultimate, like that's where the arena is for that's the capital over there. That's where the power is. And so how I'd say it's helping understand these things as not disconnected functions, but like, how does this school run? Oh, it's because we are connected to this other thing that is this district. We have other schools, and this is how we're governed with each other, and helping them be a part of that process, helping the content that you're talking about, teaching about, actually be about things that are happening in real time in your neighborhood or something that actually can be relevant in your school board. And 9 times out of 10, bring a few youngins, have a couple youngins pop out to a school board, to the Capitol. They're one of the few young people in that room, if not one of the few folks just in general in there. And here in a democracy, in a democratic republic, people are the power. So bring the young people and they will see in real time what power looks like, and that they have it, that they wield it, that there's a responsibility about having it, and that it's important for each other to be able to understand that and practice that together, and to respect that by like doing the research and being able to advocate off of your values. So I think I just love that question. I think it starts, yes, with the school board, starts local, and it starts with even your classroom.
I don't know what to add to that.
There
Create
you go.
create the space as a school leader so that that can happen. And again, we design schools with so little space to really be innovative, creative, connected. Um, we see ourselves as outside of the community. I always worry that educators um, imagine themselves as the end all of engaging our young people towards their personhood. It has to be a community effort. We see ourselves here as a community learning center. We always have been. It comes from found one of our mentors, Dr. Wayne Jennings, who wrote a paper I think in the 70s about community learning centers. We open up this space to our community. They know that, and we interact here, not only in terms of what we're doing at in our task as a high school, but also in terms of us being a community member. And so, we just make sure that we're not making ourselves so busy with a bunch of stuff that we can't do that.
That's right.
And one thing I would add, just because I appreciate that community learning center style, because that is my experience, and one of my fundamental moments that just forever changed me was we at High School for Corners have the New School for African American Thought. And for me, and they of course encourage students to go, and they invite community elders and community members to be educators, because that's what they are, and they hold this wisdom, and we want to create a container for those conversations. And so being able to just be in that container, to be able to hear about the Greenwood district, Angela Davis, to understand what the Black Panthers did, to like, it just, the cat got out the bag and I never was able to put it back. And I was able to then understand. That's genuinely when I talk about my artistry turning into activism, like that's when I seen like, oh, my voice actually can be like, actually I want to use my voice here. I want to actually be able to understand how I can not just, yes, evoke emotions with a good song or two, but also be able to have something to say, and to be able to say it with the understanding of everything that's come before I've brought myself to this moment. So just super appreciate that mindset, and that the Capitol is like our backyard, and your
Right.
open-mindedness, because it's been game changer, of course, yes, for me and for the work that we're doing, and just being able to set a new norm, and to be able to point to an example that it is possible, we are doing it. So I just, and the New School for African American thought is still popping, happening. So pop out, y'all. You'll see me at the next one.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, let me, as we draw toward the witching hour, as they say, I do want to make sure I point out the great support that the schools all over Minnesota have been receiving from the Minnesota Department of Education. We've had some conversations with them leading up to this moment, and they've just been super great. Particularly the alternative options department. They were at the RAPSA conference last November, and I won't let the secret out of the bag looking toward this November. But last November they presented a framework for schools and states departments of education, those SEAs, around youth advocacy and youth voice and youth engagement. And so we will follow up with some information to those that are attending and those that are registered with that framework. But I just wanted to lift up the Minnesota Department of Ed for the work that they're doing. And we know that they are in collaboration with some of our other partners at Education Northwest in a collaborative of states, SEAs, from all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. And so we hope to see them again in November at the RAPSA conference. So as we close out, perhaps you could leave us with a gift this November 3rd, because we like to give gifts. But if each of you could leave our audience with one thing, with one lesson learned, or with one nugget, one gift, what would that be?
Um, well, in the words of John Lewis, I ask you to answer your heart's highest calling and to stand for what you truly believe, unquote. And I believe in this idea of America. I believe in us. I believe in, this pursuit of happiness. And so your happiness and your excitement and your pursuit of is important. You have a gift. It's important. We need you. We need you activated. From California all the way here to your North Star state, we are all connected. And so I just ask for you to be an active driver, an active participant of democracy, and we need you.
I would say that our voices matter, and being a proud member of this community, there's so many examples of it here um, that I think it's just worth mentioning. I mean, Minnesota is the place where the charter movement started, and it started from families and teachers coming together, saying that they wanted to offer option for their young people that was more innovative, that got to know them better, more learner centered. And out of that came, an incredible opportunity for young people all across the country. We saw the creative voice of Prince's movement in terms of what he's done in terms of our lives and the soundtracks for our lives. But recently we've seen from George Floyd, but particularly with the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, what this community has done in raising its voice to address something that they saw that was not just, and doing it with bravery and collaboration and simply, just a sense of purpose that I think has galvanized the country and quite literally people from around the world. Those are just voices. Our voices matter. When we come together, I think you said, there's nothing more powerful than the people. So my gift is my voice, and my gift to you is your voice.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen. Charnice, if you could put up the survey slide there, and I'll close us out. I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you, Andy, for your comment, and I see Christopher's comment there. Super inspired by Jose's insight. Awesome work, and I agree. Hey, this is the first, but not the last, of our professional development series for RAPSA and for all of our partners. We want to bring together our At Promise and alternative education and workforce community from coast to coast. So keep an eye out. There's a quick survey there. It'll help us make programming better. And I just, if you, we'll keep that up for a few more minutes, but I just want to note that here in California, I think in another month or two, we'll be doing a series with our former California Supreme Court Chief Justice around youth voice and civic engagement, and with our Governor's Office Youth Empowerment Commission. So actively engaging youth with listening sessions. And then we hope to be in a region, in an area near you to make this engagement happen. Tony and Jose, thank you very, very much for joining us. You guys be safe, and we'll be connecting with you soon. Keep charging hard, gentlemen.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
With
Ciao.
that, have a great day. All right.